So thank you everyone for joining us today. The topic of the day is business efficiency, but what does that mean exactly, especially for growing businesses? So leaders, as we say, know what they know, but they don't know what they don't know. So the plan for the next hour is to provide new perspectives on how to incorporate greater efficiency into your operations and processes so that your growth will be smoother and faster. So we'll start with some, opening comments from Randall. We'll flip into Q&A. But first, a little bit about Randall. He has founded several successful startups. He held a long-time position in a Big Four consulting firm. He was a senior executive at an American public company, author of 8 books, in the Speaker Hall of Fame. He's helped over 100 organizations scale, and he works with me at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, helping organizations grow their businesses. So,
So,
Randall, in your many years of senior leadership experience, what do you have to say about efficiencies? Is there a way to actually get ahead of the insatiable amount of meetings and decisions and action items?
yeah, of course there is. Of course there is. But I'd like to also just take a step back because I wanted to focus some of my opening remarks on the expression, is the juice worth the squeeze? That was kind of the subtitle of it all. And I thought I'd just share a few anecdotes. A number of years ago, I was leading a board. It was a search for a new CEO, and one of the questions that I asked the candidates, one of what was about, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is this something that you're interested in doing? A number of years before, I was coaching a leader who was working for a global IT firm, where he had to be available 24 hours a day for all the time zones. He's completely burnt out from the 7 by 24 nonstop responsibility. And his question to me was, Randall, is the juice worth the squeeze? Um, you know, a number of years before that, I was asked to coach a new leader, a new member of the executive team for a global financial services firm. And he'd built a reputation. He was promoted and then started floundering. He knew he needed help, and he asked, why his efforts weren't actually producing results. And then he said that wonderful phrase, why was the juice not worth the squeeze? And maybe just one other quick example was I was advising a leadership team on a poorly performing business unit, and the question was whether we should shut it down or not. And the question that they asked me was, is the juice worth the squeeze? So today, the focus is not on juicing fruit and making more juice, et cetera, as much as it is on the underlying issues, the squeeze, if you will, that can make a difference to the organization, whether it's recruitment or issues of personal burnout or new leadership or bad results or a lot of that stuff. A lot of it has to do with business efficiency, a few other things as well. And that's really where I wanted to focus my time with you today, and then obviously take a whole bunch of your questions as well. So we don't have a firm agenda. I'll continue with a couple other remarks, and we'll see where this goes. I will point out that a lot of my experience was with leadership teams of not-for-profits, of professional associations as well. So if there's some people here that come from that perspective, that's kind of where some of that experience and ideas come from as well. I will say that the environment that we're all operating is always changing. It could be things like the economy, which is kind of cyclical, or interest rates. So it could be things like the internet or AI or competition from other geographies or changes, for example, like we had with COVID, which we kind of never expected, but that's kind of been there and done that. But all this is changing. Our organizations are changing. The board of directors will pull you one way or pull you the other. Okay, it might be growing. Hopefully, it's not contracting, but there's changes. And certainly, as the leader, the question is, okay, well, if the underlying everything is changing and the organization is changing, the question is, how are you changing? Right? What are you doing to make sure that you're keeping up with this? Otherwise, we're going to have some of the issues. It might not be a question of business efficiency, it may be a question of inputs. Your capabilities, are they staying the same, or are they growing? Your team's capabilities, are they staying the same, or are they growing? How are they growing? What are the mechanisms to do so? I could talk about that later if there's interest, to talk about the other things. But the question of business efficiency, and this is my last quick comment before I open it for questions. I think, Ronnie, you've got a few that you've collected already, but is that it's got to start with a good strategy. If we've got a good strategy and we're sort of going along in the direction we're supposed to be going, then, well, guess what? Presumably, all of our efforts will, we're not a fish swimming upstream anymore. We're swimming with the stream. It becomes a lot easier. It's easier to go downstairs than sort of go up the stairs all the time. So we got to make sure that the strategy is right in the first place. And the challenge is, and for some of you who might sort of chuckle at the old Soviet Union where they had the 5-year plan, and you say, well, we're not the Soviet Union anymore. We're in our organization, we've got a 3-year plan. Which, by the way, I suspect, if not now, in a few years, people will say, a 3-year plan, how is that possible? Okay, things are changing so quickly. So, the question isn't just, is our strategic plan the right one? Is it the right one for right now? And I'll just remind everybody at the time that we're recording this session, is that a year and a quarter ago, no one was talking about AI or ChatGPT or any of these other tools. None. It wasn't there. So all the strategic plans that were made before, are they still the right ones now? Let's say it is the right strategic plan. How about the tactics that flow down there? There's so much that's changing, right? So we have to make sure that at that strategic level, we're going the right direction. Once that's done, then we can talk about business efficiency, right? I'll also mention, I'm sorry, I lied. I'll mention one other thing before I'll open to for questions. Toyota is known exceptionally well for what they call Kaizen. And for those of you who aren't fluent in Japanese, Kaizen means continuous improvement. Every year they would take their car and say, what's that 1% more we could do better? What's that one little bit more that we can do better? And then over the over the decades, each of their cars has got some amazing improvements. And it's not just in the cars. Pardon me. It's in their manufacturing process. It's how you're treated in the dealership. Everything just that little bit more Kaizen, just a little bit more. So we can say, if we wanted to be efficient with our business, we can use that Toyota Kaizen approach. Every year, we're going to do a little bit more, and we will get to where we need to be, unless there's something that disrupts it. So, for example, 3 or 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, there was an interloper in the automotive business called Tesla who came up with this idea of this electric car that had basically 200 parts. And it was powered by a battery, not a very, very complicated internal combustion engine. And what did that do with Toyota? Isn't it interesting that almost every auto manufacturer in the world, and I choose this example because at least on the recording, I don't think there's anyone in the automotive industry. In the automotive world, every single manufacturer, even Porsche, has come out with an electric car, right? But where in the world was Toyota? Where in the world was Toyota? So we can take a look and say, yes, business efficiency, we can be doing this incremental Kaizen. We need to be doing that. But we also need to be saying, hey, are we always looking over our shoulder for that disruptive, transformational kind of change that's going to happen? Or might we get ahead of it? And rather than wasting tons of dollars and money on all kinds of incremental changes, might we step back and say, is there an opportunity for transformation or disruption that we might be able to actually do? And therefore, what we're improving is something in a different paradigm, a different kind of level. Now, you have to do both. You have to do both. There's no question. And if you think about what a particular manager is doing in the organization, right? Their job isn't strategy and transformation and everything. We have to find a way to use all those internal brain cells. We need to find a way to harvest the collective knowledge of the organization so that while we're doing this continuous improvement, while we're doing this Kaizen, at the very, very same time, we can also look for the opportunities for transformation and disruption. This is where I get called out. Jenny DeFoy asks, didn't they have the Prius, though, before anything else was thinking about hybrid? Yes, absolutely. And for 12 years, I actually owned a Prius, an amazing. But when they came out with the Prius, okay, what happened to the innovation after the Prius?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that was the real challenge with Toyota, that they sort of jumped a little bit, and no doubt they probably make the best hybrids on the market right now because of Kaizen. Yet they had not built the internal ability to understand the electric car market properly, and let alone some of the other potential innovations. So good comment. I appreciate it, and it's true. But it's we don't have a 5-year Soviet plan here. We have a business that is moving, and we've got a business environment that's moving both at the same time. So, Rania, do we have any questions?
Randall, you took the words out of my mouth when you mentioned AI. On the topic of business efficiency, what's the dream? That AI is going to solve all of our inefficiency issues, or is that likely?
I don't know. I remember reading way back when about, computers were going to make something called the paperless office, right? And then I remembered, oh my God, I guess I was a kid when all of a sudden the schools were very, very concerned that students may have calculators and therefore not learn how to do basic, addition and subtraction and multiplication and so on. So I think AI is a tool. Really, where we are right now is the total Wild West. And I think that on one hand, what organizations need to do is almost set it loose in a sense of allow all of these um, experimenters try to see how we might actually use it. At the same time, they've got to take a strategic front, which is there some interesting business angle that we can take to make a competitive differentiation? So yes, we could have workflow improvements, right? But at the same time, it might be able to open up something completely new. I think the real issue, though, with AI, since you brought that one up, is this, and I challenge everybody who's listening to this: does your organization have an AI acceptable use policy actually implemented? Right? And the answer for most is, um, yeah, we got something quick off the internet, or okay, we should have that, or we're going to get George, who likes technology, to write something up. Okay, but how about one that's actually well considered, right? One that allows enough strategic movement for growth at the same time as battening down some of the risks. Many organizations don't have that, and certainly in our work on that particular front, in our um, AI resource kit, I mean, that's kind of the feedback that we got. So that's why that's there. I think there is a big change coming with AI. You've got to be a head in the sand if you don't actually see that. But what that also means is there needs to be new skills developed by everyone within the organization. Everyone needs to understand about how to create a prompt. How do we make sure that it doesn't hallucinate? How do we guard against all of the risks? How do we make sure that the people who are making decisions at the very top of the management team understand the potential, as opposed to saying, "Well, I don't know." If they don't understand, most of the leaders I've worked with actually, uh, they're pretty sharp people, and they may not know the right questions to ask, but once asked, they can usually figure out the solution, right? And I think that AI and how AI is going to change the business, both from an efficiency perspective, but also a strategic one, boils down to that one. How do we make sure that the leadership knows the questions to ask, both in terms of market expansion, productivity, improvement, risk mitigation, etc. And once that's done, they'll figure it out. They'll figure it out.
Randall, so AI as disruptor, as new player, as new factor, one of the biggest obstacles to efficiency is disruption. And since it's unavoidable, what's the answer? Just have lots of contingency plans and succession plans?
There's a time for planning and there's a time for acting. And most organizations in time of great change need to do two things at the same time. They need to keep that race car on the racetrack, and they've got to change the wheels at the same time. Very, very hard to do. And so part of it in the largest organizations say, let's get a team that's going to work on this. This little tiger team that's off the side, they've got to come back and report. Okay. For medium-sized companies, it's really a question of, okay, maybe we could do this in a retreat. Okay. By the way, large organizations can do it in a retreat as well, but maybe we sort of hide this off from the regular day to day. to make a lot of progress on a particular task, a particular thinking, if you will, and then go back and sort of move that along. Part of it is with respect to, when the strategic planning happens, the more senior levels. The question is, how do we make sure that we're able to harvest the weak signals and harvest the knowledge so that when that strategic planning happens, it's successful. For the smallest companies, the micro companies, the professional associations that are very, very thin. Well, for professional associations, part of it is a question of saying, okay, can you use your volunteer base? Okay, are there some people within it that you could put together, perhaps externally facilitated, to sort of go through a process to come up with something at the very end, or start from something, then customize it as a volunteer base? The smallest organizations, this might be a question of perhaps outsourcing it, okay, to people who know something about it, and say, okay, well, fine, you know associations very well, entrepreneurs very well, and you know throw it over the fence, throw it back, and then you've got something to go with. So part of the other way, I should say, is sometimes with coaching it can help. Just have a conversation with somebody who's got some different brain cells than you, right? And to say, okay, what might be, how might we do this? What if something happens, and so on.
So at the other end of the disruption spectrum, we have, the way things are, the way we do things. So when you finally, establish your systems and you feel good about them, complacency sits in. So when efficiencies and systems are established and humming along and we check that box and put out of mind, doesn't that also put the risk that we're going to, not see opportunity when it's there? Like, talk to me about those checks and balances. Like, how often should our processes be reviewed? Like, that's realistic. We're all busy.
So I don't think this is one of those things where we say, okay, this is Tuesday. Tuesday is the review of process week. Wednesday is let's check in on technology week, right? Day, I should say. Like I don't think it's that. I think that every organization has got some degree of planning. It could be very loose, it could be very structured, etc. Um, but at a certain point, you set in place certain processes. Okay, this is how we onboard a such and such. This is how we deal with renewals. This is how we onboard a client. Whatever it happens to be, you've got a process to it. And then what you do is you say, okay, now let's add a technology layer to it to make it more efficient, to make it self-serve, to bring a number of different ways of sharing and collaborating the data. Okay, and that's right, we could do something with the data as well. So now you've got a process, you've got a technology, and then you've got growth, or you've got disruption, or you've got change, etc. And all of a sudden, instead of being something that is efficient, the technology is almost a straitjacket because it doesn't allow any kind of change, right? And at that point, you'll start to see some of the stats change. Okay, it takes longer to fill in the blank. Okay, people are frustrated, whether it be external stakeholders or internal ones or partners, etc. They're frustrated by it. People internally are frustrated by it. Gee, why can't we do it a different way? Right? This isn't working anymore. Gee, it's not like the old days. A whole bunch of different types of complaints. At that particular point, that's the red flag for the leadership to say, I think I think that we need to do something here. I'll tell you when it's not a good thing is when the latest technology vendor sort of knocks on your door and says, hey, we've got this neat technology and we just want to implement this new technology. It's got to be driven in a certain sense from what's in. Vendors have got a role, of course, because they've got the newest, shiniest object and it's good for you to be educated about them. But as soon as the things start to stretch, a little bit, that's when you have to say, okay, at some point we're going to have to make a change here. Okay, sometimes it's just a question of adding a little bit onto technology. Okay, sometimes it's a question of looking at the process underneath and saying there's stretch marks here too. The one tool that I would strongly suggest anyone consider using is the whole concept of journey mapping. That's the idea of saying, okay, from at the very beginning, when somebody during a process touches it, and all the touches until the end of the process, okay, what are they? Because at every single step at that of that journey. So, for example, with entrepreneurs, it's from they meet you for the first time, or they're aware of you the first time they sign the contract, or they actually start working with you. All the touch points from there to there. In a not-for-profit, like a professional association, it might be everything from new member acquisition to event registration for the annual conference, for example. But there's touch points in all these things, right? And at every single touch point, certain things happen. Number one, trust either goes up or down. That's it. Trust is eroded or trust is grown. This is a great decision I made. Oh, I can hardly wait for the next step, etc. Or it's not good. So if trust goes up or down and there's a change, that's a bit of a reflection. Um, is there frustration at any particular point? Is there a choke point? Is there friction at any one of these touch points? There's a whole bunch of questions that we typically would ask in journey mapping. It's something can be done internally, just needs to be coached through. It doesn't need to be, lots of million diagrams and everything. I mean, you can do that, but it's not the biggest job, if you will. Excuse me. So so these are the things that if you do journey mapping, you'll get a sense as to whether indeed either the process or the technology that enables it is perhaps needs to be relooked at. Sometimes, sorry, I'm just going to add, sometimes what you can do is you can do surveys, you could do focus groups, you could do postmortems, you can do onboarding conversations. There's a whole bunch of different things where you can see where that trust is going up or going down.
We have a question here from Cheryl. How do you measure the level of trust?
Okay, so I sort of I partially just answered that. But what I'll do is this. I'll suggest that the way that you measure trust, okay, is not so hard. Okay, on one hand, you could use um, um, models like Barry and Parasuraman's um, service quality leadership model. It's called ServQual. Okay, and that's a very sophisticated survey instrument that measured responsiveness, reliability, empathy, assurance, and trust, right? Part of it is a question of you deciding what are the benchmarks that you actually have and the indicators of trust and actually doing surveys or questions or focus groups on those very, very specific things along the way. Part of it is to take a look at the results and say, hey, it's a friction point here. How come people are not converting to the next step in the journey map? Okay, but they did once. So what was happening? Can you do exit interviews to sort of probe a little bit more qualitatively, right? Maybe it's a question of putting together a team, this kind of thing we would facilitate where we pull out, okay, and imagine different ways of actually solving that problem beyond just what's there right now, right? So that's probably a quick answer to the question, Cheryl. I appreciate it.
Randall, there are all kinds of people in this world. So we have all kinds of leaders with different types of brains and styles. And some leaders are very creative and they're open to new ideas. Some are very organized, some are fast, some are more timid. When leaders are process people, like what should their hiring process, what should their team look like? Should they be looking at people with like opposite natures for them to like create balance, or does that create friction when there isn't the same sort of like style? Like we see this all the time with our clients where there's like a partnership and there's like consistent disagreements because their style is different.
So, man, that's a good question. And just for everybody who's here, I don't know what questions Rania is asking because either she's coming up with them or because you've asked them and sent them to her. So, this is the time when I'm thinking through what my answer is while I'm just extending the time a little bit so I can appear somewhat intelligent. Um, the way I'll answer that is this. There's a certain bit of nicey that sometimes takes place in organizations where everyone is afraid um, to um, to rock the boat a little bit and afraid to call each other out, not in a negative, kind of way, but in a constructive way to sort of hammer at an idea. And once it's cleared, I'm not talking about an interpersonal conflict, etc. We're focused on the business task at hand. But sometimes we forget about that because we're worried about offending or triggering or a whole bunch of other things. And it's kind of one of these things. We're not authoritarians, but we're not like a la kind of camp. This is a professional environment most people operate in. So the idea of saying, gee, we want to make sure that there's this perfect fit between people. Okay, I'm going to say that sometimes having imperfect fits are where we get some of the really, really interesting ideas in innovation and exploration of ideas. So that's one part of the answer. The other part is this. I think we all have known, colors, disc, Myers-Briggs, you name Bassiter, okay, you name all of these different, and there's like dozens of them, personality, work style, innovation, whatever it is, and you say, okay, um, somebody is a this and I'm a this, and therefore it's going to go very well. And I think these are all good tools to help you understand perhaps a little bit more about how you work and perhaps how you might get the best out of those around you. But I think that sometimes, unless we've spent a lot of time delving into a particular tool, it's very difficult to sort of, you go down this rabbit hole of personality types and this and that, and one, well, they're an ENTJ, which means I should be approaching them this way and that way. Hey, folks, we got a job to do here, right? Okay, spending all this extra processing time sometimes actually gets in the way of us actually getting that good team fit to happen. They say that it takes 2 years for a team to gel of whatever styles people are. Because at that point, you know each other well enough that you know where the strengths and the weaknesses are. All these frameworks, all these models are ones that are helpful. Okay, but I think that we need to be careful about being dogmatic. Number three, there's one particular model that I actually love, which is the Ambassador Simplicity Innovation and Creativity model. And that says that every person has got a role in the innovation process, and everyone's got a particular type of strength. Okay, so for example, some people are the people that are all the naysayers, right? Oh, this guy, where this guy, and you're thinking, my God, am I working with a black hole here? Okay, well, in the Baster model, that person is probably the only person who's able to see the one reason, one part that will prevent the whole thing from falling apart. And they feel that their job, and they're built for this, is to find all those little flaws, and therefore that they get rid of those flaws and everything will be successful. Job well done. Oh, that's so satisfying to do. I couldn't imagine being that person myself, right? Other people, for example, are implementers, where they're really, really good at actually executing. Like, they're super fast, they're good at it, and they could see the connections, okay, better than anybody else in terms of actually getting it done. Other people are generators, okay, like they come up with a bunch of ideas and can wire things together in a way that no one else can, right? And so I like that particular model because you can say, okay, the entire team, let's do it, okay, and see kind of where we are. And maybe people can not feel so bad about, gee, he generates ideas but never can get anything done. Gee, all they can do is work, 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 but they don't have a strategic bone in their body. Gee, this person is no, no, no. These are just angles, if you will, on helping you to work together and get that team together. And so those 3 points that I made really are kind of the spectrum of let's have conflict, let's have difference, let's use some of these things. And gee, here's a particular tool that I particularly like, that can help.
Randall, I want to jump to a question here from Cam. Thank you, Cam. Nice to see you again. Many companies are following 4DX. The plan is tremendously valuable, but after many years of practice, we are finding that the world has changed and there are a lack of metrics to measure against. With the reduced workforce, it is becoming more and more difficult to spend the same amount of time on the 4DX plan. The question is there a different system other than 4DX to consider? With that, we'll break here part one of our discussion on business efficiency. We'll pick up with more Q&A in part two. But if anything we've talked about so far resonates with you, do reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation and share resources. You can email us at info@randallcraig.com or book a call at www.randallcraig.net/30. See you back for part two.